Welcome back to Catholic Lunch Break here on AM 1430. This is the weekly program where we catch up with all things Catholic in the greater Houston area. My name is Wyatt Goolsby. I'm the executive director of this radio station, KSHJ. We here in the greater Houston area are blessed to have so many people of faith who are responding to Christ's call to visit those imprisoned. Even more than that, we have locals who are doing all they can to make sure at-risk youth and juveniles get back on the right track. Here in the studio to talk more about their work in pastoral care, advocacy, faith sharing with at-risk youth and their families is Deacon Fernando Garcia from St. Edith Stein and Katy, and Mónica Ramón, Associate Director of Special Youth Services, which is part of the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston. Welcome to you both. Thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it, and you're willing to share a little bit about this ministry.
Thank you for having us.
Deacon Fernando, I want to start with you. And, here in the greater Houston area, there is, of course, a great need for volunteers, for people to help with at-risk youth, juveniles, their families, as I mentioned, to get them back on the right track with their lives. When did you first start hearing about this kind of ministry work at-risk youth?
So 2017, I was actually in formation for the diaconate at the time, and having joined the ministry, it's part of what we call our social ministry in formation. And so every deacon in the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston, beyond ordination, must also maintain a minimum amount of time that is spent out in the community. Now, that can be with adult prisons, detention centers, hospitals. We have up to about 20 different social ministries that deacons are out there serving. And that begins in formation. So during formation, we were presented with different opportunities. And that was actually the first time I ever heard of juvenile detention centers. Even as a juvenile myself, had never heard of juvenile detention centers. Everything you hear about is adults in prison and never juveniles. And so had that opportunity. So again, it was in 2017 that I began as a volunteer. And what we did as candidates for the diaconate is a lot of one-on-one visits. So you get a lot of personal time working one-on-one with the youth, just kind of hearing their stories. They just want to be heard. They want somebody that can just spend time with them, listen to them without being judged. And so that was a beautiful part of it. I still remember my first visit, driving home that evening. I actually cried. I cried, and I still get teary-eyed thinking about it, because it was just so emotional, just hearing the weight that these kids were carrying, and them just wanting to unload some of that weight and talking to someone that cared for them, that was just there just because. And so I remember another candidate that was there. We talked about it and said, man, I wish there was more that we could do. And, you've heard, be careful what you ask for. And so it was about 6 months of volunteering when I was offered an opportunity to come on board with Special Youth Services as staff, as a pastoral minister. And so what that meant was actually doing the ministry that I was doing on a full-time basis in 7 different facilities in 5 different counties. Wow. And so I went, just full on in this ministry, and just had the blessing of being able to reach out to so many youth. And oftentimes there's this idea, as is in formation, part of it is less of me and more of you, more of God in our life. And so the humility of understanding that we're going into a place not to bring God into the place, because God is already there, but just to see God's work at hand and taking so much from it, just seeing God at work already with these youth, and just saying, okay, God, where do I fit in? And so I worked with Special Youth Services for about 5.5 years before moving on to the Office of the Permanent Diaconate, but I still continue to support them in different ways and have little projects here and there that I still support them, because it is truly a calling. It's not just like, like the diaconate is a calling that comes from the heart. And so all of our volunteers that are involved in it, it's what it is for them too. It's just a calling.
Yeah, sounds so rewarding. And I appreciate, Deacon Fernando, you're specifying the difference between adults in prison and juveniles in particular, because like I said, many of these youth need somebody to talk to, like you were talking about, when they may come from troubled backgrounds or troubled families, and they've never had a person like you just be able to listen to them without judgment and be able to hear their stories, their backgrounds, where they may have fallen off the right path. And so I know and can imagine that for them, it's very powerful. So, Mónica, to that end, I wanted to ask you more about Special Youth Services in particular, noting that it's specifically for the at-risk youth and juveniles. Tell me more in general. We're talking about this ministry, Special Youth Services. It's under the umbrella of the Archdiocese.
Correct.
So what all does that entail?
Great. So Special Youth Services is a ministry of the Archdiocese, you're correct. We are under the Office of Social Concerns and Social Justice. And essentially what we're doing is we are trying to bridge the gap between, the call that we have to serve those that are in prison, but specifically to the youth. And so we work with kids that are between the ages of 10 and 17. Typically at the age of 18, usually the children at that age are processed as adults. And so we go into facilities that are specifically juvenile detention or residential facilities in and across the Archdiocese. Now, the Archdiocese covers 10 counties. And so technically our call is to be in each of those 10 counties. And currently we're not. We're in about 5 of the counties right now. But the goal is that we can eventually spread this ministry across the whole Archdiocese and to support the work of the Archbishop, as we are called to go and to serve those that are in prison and to reach out to them. So our volunteers, we have a number of volunteers that serve across different counties and in different juvenile detention centers and in different residential facilities. And they go in on a weekly basis, and their main ministry is just to be present to the youth. They are showing up for weekly Bible studies and for one-on-one visits. And their main goal is to, as Deacon Fernando said, be a listening ear, somebody that the youth can talk to, that can, they can pray with, somebody that can help to inform them about, Scripture and God's mercy. And a lot of times these kids, this is their first time hearing, about Jesus. Or if they've heard about Jesus, they don't know who he is, and they don't know the mercy that Jesus is extending to them. And so it's a really, really beautiful ministry of, this is, I always see it as like this is such fertile ground for sharing the gospel. And that's essentially what our volunteers do. We do also have volunteers that serve in different ways that may not go directly into the facilities. So we have supporters that support through creating hope bags for our kids. And a hope bag is essentially a paper sack that is decorated and just covered with messages of support and handwritten letters that is included, and different snacks and things for the kids. And so we've had different schools and youth groups that have supported through providing hope bags for the kids in the facilities. We also have some of our volunteers who write reflections based off of the readings that the kids receive for Bible study every week. And so we have reflection writers who can, reflect on the readings from Mass for the week or the Gospel for the week, and that contribute by, sending those messages into the facilities as well. And so there's a variety of ways that people can support, but we noticed that, one of the main ways that our volunteers get involved and enjoy being involved is by visiting the kids in the facilities.
Very good. So that's good to know that, of course, there are so many volunteer opportunities, whether it's a layperson or a clergy member who wants to help in a chaplain capacity as well. The need is definitely there. Like you said, you guys want to get there to all 10 of the 10 counties, I think is what you were saying. So that's a huge area. So I can imagine the challenge. So, Monica, Deacon Fernando was talking about how he really was something special for him when he really started to volunteer and talk and help these at-risk youth. Did you start off also in a volunteer capacity, and what made you kind of say to yourself, this is a very special ministry that I want to be a part of?
I did get started as a volunteer. And actually, Deacon Fernando was a big part of the story of how I got started in volunteering. Essentially, I was teaching in Catholic schools for about 5 years before I joined the staff full-time as the associate director. And when I was teaching in Catholic schools, that's a very rewarding mission. It's a very rewarding call. However, there just so happened to be one Mass that I attended, not at my home parish, and I really do think that this, God oriented this way. And I remember seeing Deacon Fernando at the I forget the name.
St. Joseph's.
Right, exactly. It was at St. Joseph's. And he was sharing in a homily about the kids that he served in the facilities and about how there was, I guess, one specific conversation that he had with one of the youth that was saying that he did not see himself as good. And that struck me because I really remember thinking, I've had the privilege of being raised with 2 parents who always enforced the idea that I am good. To my core, I know that I'm a good person. And this child really thought that he was bad, that he was made bad. And so I remember thinking, if I'm allowed to feel and know and think that I am good, there are other people that need to hear this. There's obviously youth that need to hear this message. And so I kind of felt the tug of the Holy Spirit at that point saying, you should go talk to Deacon Fernando and go see if this is something that you should pursue. And so, several months later, eventually I, went through the trainings and did paperwork and was able to go into the downtown facility for the first time, the Harris County downtown facility. And that is the largest facility that we serve. There's usually between around 150 to 200 youth that are there at any given time. And, it was definitely a jarring experience in terms of the sounds, the noises, the banging doors, having to get buzzed, through different doors. But once we actually got onto a floor, for my first time being on a floor on a unit with the youth, it was immediate for me, knowing how impactful this ministry would be, not just for the youth, but for me. What I could learn from the kids as they were processing their own experiences, as they were, turning to God in their suffering. I really was struck by that, and it just made me want to keep coming back for more. So I ended up volunteering for, I think, again, it was about 2.5 years before I ended up hearing about the opening of the position for associate director, and that actually was also an answered prayer for me. I loved teaching, but I knew that my heart was in the ministry, and I remember asking the Lord one time, just like, God, if I could do this full time, I would do it in a heartbeat. And lo and behold, the position opened up, and so I applied and got accepted. And so now I get to serve in a different capacity. I still go to facilities. I still am able to move in and around the different facilities that we serve, but I also am able to help in, helping to form our volunteers, helping to, train and to have retreats for our volunteers, supporting them, supporting our pastoral ministers who are on staff as well. All of that is a very rewarding experience for me. Being able to bring more of the community into this ministry is very rewarding. And
a very powerful example of discernment and talking with God about what your next steps are in your life, Mónica, right, and what you want to do, and then God responding and saying, here's an opportunity where you can continue to serve me in that capacity as well. Yeah. Deacon Fernando, I want to back up here for a second because Mónica had mentioned a very powerful story about how you talked to the youth who thought that he was not inherently good, that he was a bad person. I can imagine that when you're talking with some of these at-risk youth or juveniles, that part of the conversation is just letting them know that they are loved by God in a very basic capacity because, like Mónica was saying, they, in some cases, never heard of that before.
One of the things that I think of, and this came up recently, is St. Dismas on the cross. Mm-hmm. And if we think about him, he had given up. And all he wanted was just to be remembered. He wasn't asking to actually go to heaven. He just remember me. And Jesus provided so much more. He said, you'll be with me. And so I think of St. Dismas, and I think of these kids that have lost hope, have lost value in themselves. And for me, I think what's very telling is how the smallest things can make them feel valuable. And I'll share two quick examples. One of them is a young lady. Now, as a pastoral minister, when I was on staff, we have the ability ourselves where we visit during the court when they're in court sessions. And we visit in the back, pray with the kids before they go in to see the judge. And so I wasn't able to make it to her court date, but I had it on my calendar so I could pray for her. Mm-hmm. And so when I saw her that evening, I asked her how things went. And she goes, how did you know I had court? I said, we talked about it. You gave me the date. I said, I put it down so that I could be praying for you. And she goes, you were praying for me? I said, yes. And she goes, thank you. And so just that alone, just like, wow. And then another one was a young man. Our ministry is very blessed with donors that provide Bibles, for example. We can buy Bibles for the kids and provide them that. And I remember giving a young man a Bible, and I write the name on the cover for him, and I give it to him. And he said, is this for me? And I said, yes. He goes, it's mine. I said, yes. So when I leave here, I can take it with me. I said, yes. Mm-hmm. And just the look on his face of like, wow, he's just, thank you. So
something simple like that.
Something that simple also tells me just where they're at, that those simple little things that we take for granted, that we might have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 Bibles at home and we're not opening them up. Mm-hmm. And here's this young man that's so excited about getting a Bible that's his, that he can call his own.
Wow, it's incredible. Tell me how that connects, Deacon Fernando, to your own calling as a deacon, because you were telling me that you kind of got into this ministry, of course, when you were in the formation. So yes, it sort of has that intimate connection in that sense to your accepting this calling, I guess, to join the diaconate.
Mm-hmm. So one of the hardest questions that you can ask a man in formation, and even a deacon, is why do you want to be a deacon? Mm-hmm. that there is no easy answer. And I still tell myself there really isn't a set answer, and you have to continue to. And I still ask myself that question. As a matter of fact, this weekend, my wife and I had a conversation is, why do I want to be a deacon? And sometimes it's a matter of asking ourselves so that we can remain humble, because we need to be humble. But as a deacon, we're called, if in Acts 6, think about the first deacons that were called, they were called to minister. They didn't have a choice. They just said, this is what's needed. Go out and serve. And so ministering to the youth and juvenile detention centers, I think, is so essential, because if our adults that are in prison are forgotten, these kids are even more forgotten, because you can go to most parishes in the Catholic Church, their websites, and a good number may have prison ministry, but it's all adult.
Yeah, right.
It's all adult. And so we forget about these kids. Part of it is because also privacy, there's more confidentiality when it comes to the youth, but because of that also, that they're truly forgotten. So they're really out there on the outskirts, just totally forgotten. And so as deacons, that's where we need to be. We need to be there. As a deacon, we're called to be ministers of the word, ministers of the altar, and of charity. And we need to be capable in all three. And so one of the things that I say, if I have the privilege, because as a deacon, we have during the liturgy, we read the gospel, but we have the privilege, with the permission of the pastor, to do a homily. And so if we're going to preach the word, then we need to be able to walk that walk. And so we need to be able to serve the least of these. And so we look at Matthew chapter 25, serving the least of our brothers. And so I think it's right there where all deacons are called to be, not just in this area, but this specifically, because there's such a great need. But we need to be out in the margins. We need to be getting our hands dirty, making sure that we are serving as his hands and feet where others choose not to for different reasons. And you use a key word earlier, discernment. It's a discernment. And so people discern, and they're called elsewhere, and that's understandable. There's so many different ways to serve. This is a very unique ministry, and discernment is essential, because it has to be truly a calling to be able to minister to these youth, and to leave yourself at home and just come in open with the Spirit to serve these youth.
Monica, why is it so important that we specify the youth as opposed to just saying all adults who are in jail, that we have this ministry that specifically focuses on this age range that you had mentioned earlier?
Mm-hmm. I think, like Deacon Fernando said, the youth are often forgotten. They are, unfortunately, they're at the mercy of the system. And there's a lot of things that contribute to a youth ending up in a place like juvenile detention. Unfortunately, there are school systems and other things that are at play that are failing the youth in different ways. And I see that, on a daily basis, I would say, where there are so many things where the kids are at the mercy of what's given to them. And so when we're talking about bringing different volunteers or clergy members, whoever it is, into a facility to show up for these kids, that impact can last a lifetime. I truly do believe, after having worked in Catholic schools with middle school students and now, working with these youth, I see where, the smallest things can make a huge impact on the life of a child and really turning their lives around. And I just really do believe that when we show the kids that, you have a chance, there is an opportunity for you that is outside of this. And when we can really go in and to kind of hopefully interrupt some of the cycles or the patterns that we unfortunately see in family systems, over many different years, I think that we'll see, an impact on our communities, an impact on our churches. And I do believe that there's a lot of good that can be done there. And also, Deacon Fernando was speaking a little bit earlier about, being on the margins. And I really do believe that is a call for our church. And while there are, so many different ways that the church is serving in many different capacities, and they are all so important, again, when we come in and help these youth specifically, I think that we'll see that blessing can be extended over and over again, whether it's through the conversations that we have and that we're impacted by, the prayer that happens in these facilities. I just really do believe that the graces extend over the boundaries of what's inside a facility. So yeah. I really do truly believe very much in these kids and in their their intelligence, in the beauty that they have to offer, the gifts that they have to offer. I see it every day, and I really do believe very strongly in that.
Amen. Well, I know there are a lot of people out there praying for the youth, at-risk youth, as well as juveniles. And, hopefully people who may see this interview who want to volunteer. Luckily, we know there are lots of capacities, ways to do that. Luckily, we have deacon and a layperson. So again, whatever capacity people want to volunteer, they can contact you guys with the Archdiocese. In addition to that, I know you guys reach out to the individual parishes. So maybe if somebody's part of a parish group that may want to start something on one of the different churches, they can contact you guys about that as well. So Monica, for people who want to learn more about special youth services, where do they need to go?
Great. So we have our website that is on the Archdiocesan website. So if you visit the Archdiocesan website, you search up Special Youth Services, you will land on our page. And so there are numbers to contact that are there. And we would love to have a conversation just to speak more about the ministry, the commitment that we're asking for from our volunteers. But again, as you were saying, that there are many different ways that parishes can get involved. Like I said earlier, we are trying to get to all 10 counties of the Archdiocese in time. And so, even if there are parishes that are listening that are, in different parts of the Archdiocese, we would love to have, more involvement from the outskirts and see if we can get into some of the counties that we have yet to get to yet. Helping with hope bags, kids of all ages have helped with that before. And so if you'd like to donate any materials for the hope bags, or, like Deacon spoke of earlier, the Bibles that we take into the facilities, those are paid for by donors. And so we really appreciate any help with that. But in terms of involvement, yes, if you want to visit the website, give us a call. We would be more than happy to speak more about the ministry.
Very good. So again, that's on the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston's website, archgh.org, and you can look for Special Youth Services. That's the name of the ministry, Special Youth Services. Deacon Fernando, I'll give you the last word here. Why do you think it would be rewarding for people to volunteer or maybe get involved with this ministry, or even just learn more about it if they didn't know that we had it here in our area?
I think the most important thing is just to give it a try. As far as, number one, look it up. Go to the website. Ask questions. Do not be afraid. I think that's one of the things that holds us back so many times, is that we feel that, that's not for me, or, what can I offer? And this is truly like the diaconate, really, which, we are all called to that spirit of diaconia, to be servants, is a ministry of presence. And so especially for those that feel that, I don't know what I have to offer, or I don't know much, or I don't know the Bible, and, I can't do Bible studies. This is a ministry of presence. These kids are just excited that you can show up and be there week in and week out. And so as far as the reward, those are the things that God will provide. It's hard to say because this is truly it's not an easy ministry. What you encounter, what you hear is heavy. One of the things that I appreciate about Special Youth Services is that there's in-services that are provided also for volunteers, which is great, a lot of training. But within each facility, the volunteers begin to build like their little family, their support, so that they can talk amongst themselves, because this is, again, confidentiality. So we can't be going into the facility and talking to the whole world about what's going on inside. We can invite them to volunteer, but again, as far as the reward, it's just going back to Matthew 25, is knowing that we are doing what Christ is asking us to do, is to serve the least of our brothers, those that cannot help themselves. These youth are spending, some of them up to a year or 2 years within these walls. And so just to be able to give them a glimpse of hope, to go beyond just, even though they're just happy just remembering their name, just to be able to say, hey, Wyatt, how are you doing this week? And they're like, wow, you remembered my name. But to go beyond that and start building up their esteem and reminding them, not giving them their dignity, but reminding them they still have it. And so the rewards will come. It's hard to just narrow down what will be the rewards, but it is a very rewarding experience to go in and just be able to be a part of the gospel.
Yeah, what a powerful ministry. Well, we appreciate you both being here to talk a little bit about it. Deacon Fernando Garcia and Mónica Ramón, thank you both. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wyatt. Appreciate it.